A love that defied the odds. Claire Thompson had always believed that love was something meant for the young, the dreamers, or those willing to risk heartbreak. At 50 years old, she had built a life of quiet stability, successful, independent, and fiercely self-sufficient. She was a respected literature professor at a prestigious university, had traveled the world, and had dined with intellectuals and artists. Yet, for all her achievements, love had remained a distant, almost foreign concept. Romance had knocked on her door a few times in her younger years, but none of the relationships ever lasted. Some men found her too ambitious, too focused on her career. Others were intimidated by her sharp wit and strong opinions. Over time, she convinced herself that she was simply not built for love. And so, she poured herself into her books, her students, and the quiet companionship of solitude. But all of that changed on an evening that seemed entirely ordinary, until it wasn't. The unexpected encounter. Claire had been invited to a charity gala, a fundraising event for underprivileged students. Normally, she would have politely declined such social engagements, preferring an evening at home with a glass of wine and a classic novel. But one of her colleagues had insisted, claiming it was for a good cause and that her presence would make a difference. Dressed in an elegant yet understated navy blue gown, Claire walked into the grand ballroom of the event, her mind already counting the hours until she could return home. She drifted through the room, engaging in polite conversation, until she reached the refreshment table. That was when fate intervened. As she reached for a cup of coffee, another hand did the same. The sudden touch startled her, and in a split second of distraction, the coffee cup tipped over, spilling onto the crisp white shirt of the man standing beside her. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Claire gasped, grabbing a napkin and instinctively dabbing at the stain. The man, instead of looking annoyed, simply chuckled, a deep, rich laugh that sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Well, I guess this is fate forcing us to talk," he said, flashing a grin that was both confident and kind. He was tall, well-built, and had the kind of presence that commanded attention. His dark brown skin glowed under the soft lighting, and his sharp suit only added to his charm. But what struck Claire the most were his eyes, warm, inviting, and filled with a quiet depth. James Carter, that was his name, as she soon learned. He was a 42-year-old entrepreneur, a self-made real estate mogul who had built his company from the ground up. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood, faced hardships, and overcome obstacles that many would have crumbled under. And yet, despite his success, there was no arrogance about him, only an effortless charisma that made Claire feel at ease, a connection that felt different. What started as a polite conversation stretched into something far more engaging. They spoke about books. James admitted he wasn't much of a reader, but he was fascinated by how passionately Claire talked about literature. In return, he told her about his early struggles, the moments of doubt, and the perseverance that had brought him to where he was today. Hours passed, and Claire found herself laughing more than she had in years. There was something about James that felt different, something genuine, something real. Then came the moment that neither of them expected. "Claire," James said, looking at her with a playful glint in his eye, "I have a crazy idea." "Oh," she raised an eyebrow. "Have dinner with me. Right now." Claire hesitated. It had been so long since she had gone on a real date. Was this even a date? She wasn't sure. But something in James's expression made her want to say yes. And so, against her usual caution, she did. They left the gala together, escaping the world of polite formalities and artificial conversations, and found a quiet little restaurant nearby. Over a simple yet delicious meal, they continued to talk, peeling away the layers of each other's lives. By the time they stepped outside, the city had quieted. A cool breeze brushed against Claire's skin, and she felt something she hadn't in years: light. "James, I have to admit," she said, wrapping her arms around herself, "I didn't expect tonight to turn out this way." "Neither did I." he admitted, stepping closer. But I'm glad it did. Their eyes met, and for the first time in decades, Claire felt the stirrings of something she had long buried. Hope. An unlikely love story begins. From that night on, Claire and James found themselves drawn to each other in ways neither had anticipated. Their dates became the highlight of their weeks. Long walks in the park, intellectual debates over coffee, nights spent discovering hidden jazz bars in the city. Despite their differences, age, background, culture, they fit together in a way that felt seamless. James brought laughter and adventure into Claire's life, while she offered him a depth of thought and conversation that he had never found before. But as their bond grew stronger, so did the whispers around them. Claire's colleagues began to gossip. "Isn't he a little young for her?" someone murmured. "She's dating a black man at her age," another whispered. Some of James's friends were equally judgmental. A rich black man dating an older white woman. What's he thinking? The scrutiny was harsh, but neither Claire nor James allowed it to shake them. They had spent their lives proving people wrong. Why stop now? Then, just as they were settling into the idea of a future together, fate decided to throw them the most unexpected twist of all. Claire started feeling different, tired, nauseous, strangely emotional. A doctor's visit changed everything. She was pregnant. At 50 years old, against all odds, Claire was carrying life within her. And as she and James sat in stunned silence, staring at the ultrasound screen that displayed not one, but two tiny heartbeats, they realized that their love story was about to take an unimaginable turn. The miracle no one expected. Claire sat in the doctor's office, her hands gripping James tightly as the ultrasound screen flickered before them. The rhythmic sound of two tiny heartbeats filled the room. A sound so soft yet so powerful that it felt as if time itself had stopped. "Twins?" Claire whispered, barely able to believe the words. "Twins," the doctor confirmed with a warm smile. "Both seem healthy, but given your age, this pregnancy will need close monitoring." Claire wasn't sure if she was breathing. Pregnant. With twins. At 50. She turned to James, her heart pounding. She expected to see worry, maybe even fear. Instead, his face broke into the widest, most genuine smile she had ever seen. "Two babies." James let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "I mean, wow." He reached for Claire's hands, his touch firm, reassuring. "This is a miracle," he said. "You know that, right? A miracle." That was one way to put it. But as Claire lay there, staring at the little flickers of life inside her, reality crashed down like a tidal wave. This wasn't just some unexpected twist in their love story. This was something that would change both of their lives forever. The weight of the world. The car ride home was quiet. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. Claire watched the city lights blur past her window, her thoughts racing. "Say something." James finally broke the silence. Claire exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "James, I don't even know where to start." "Then let's start with how you feel," he said gently, his hand finding hers. "Because honestly, I'm over the moon right now." His words surprised her. "You are?" She turned to him, her brow furrowing. "James, this is insane. I'm 50. I wasn't supposed to be able to have children, let alone twins. And yet here we are." He gave her hand a squeeze. "Claire, this is a blessing. A wild, unexpected, world-shaking blessing, but a blessing nonetheless." Claire swallowed hard. I don't know how we're going to do this. People will talk." "They already talk." James sighed. "Claire, people have been talking since we got together. First, it was about our age difference. Then, about us being an interracial couple. Now they'll have something new to gossip about." He turned to her, his voice softer now. "But do you really care what they think?" Claire's lips parted slightly. Did she? For years, she had built walls to protect herself from the judgment of others. She had always prided herself on being independent, on not needing validation from society. And yet, the thought of carrying twins at her age, of becoming a mother this late in life, filled her with a fear she couldn't ignore. "James," she whispered, "what if I can't do this?" James pulled the car into the driveway and turned to her fully, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "We're in this together, Claire, every step of the way." His words wrapped around her like a safety net, and for the first time since hearing the news, she allowed herself to breathe. Breaking the news. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Doctor's visits, prenatal vitamins, morning sickness that lasted all day. But the hardest part was telling people. Claire's colleagues at the university were stunned. "You're pregnant?" one of them had asked, barely able to hide the judgment in her tone. At a family gathering, Claire's younger sister, Melissa, nearly dropped her wine glass. "Claire, be serious," Melissa scoffed. "You're 50. This could be dangerous." "Trust me, I know," Claire said, her patience wearing thin. "But twins?" Melissa shook her head in disbelief. "You and James just got together. Are you sure this is the right thing?" Claire clenched her jaw. "What exactly are you saying?" Melissa hesitated before sighing. "I just don't want you to get hurt. And I don't want people judging you." Claire stared at her sister for a long moment. "If I worried about what people thought, I wouldn't be where I am today," she said finally. "I love James. And these babies, whether planned or not, are a part of our journey now." Melissa exhaled sharply. "I hope you're right, Claire. I really do." It wasn't exactly a blessing, but it wasn't outright disapproval either. James, on the other hand, faced a completely different reaction. His mother, Gloria Carter, a fierce woman who had raised 3 sons on her own, wasn't thrilled. "You mean to tell me you got a 50-year-old white woman pregnant with twins?" Gloria folded her arms, giving James the look she had perfected over decades of motherhood. "Mom, come on." "James, do you have any idea what people are going to say?" James groaned. "Mom, I don't care what people say." Gloria shook her head. "I'm not saying I don't like Claire. She seems like a good woman. But this is going to be tough." James softened. "I know, Mom, but Claire is my person. And these babies, they're mine too. I'm ready for this." Gloria sighed, shaking her head before finally giving him a small, reluctant smile. "Well, I hope she knows what she's getting into. Because being with a black man is one thing. Raising black babies in this world, that's another challenge entirely." James nodded, fully aware of the truth in her words. Fears and joys. As the months passed, Claire and James prepared for their new reality. They took parenting classes. They decorated the nursery, choosing soft yellows and blues. They debated baby names, Claire leaning toward classic names like Alexander and Eleanor, while James lobbied for something strong and meaningful like Elijah and Naomi. But despite the excitement, Claire couldn't shake the fear that lingered in the back of her mind. What if something went wrong? What if she wasn't physically strong enough for childbirth? One evening, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, James wrapped his arms around her. "You're thinking again," he murmured. Claire sighed. "I can't help it." "You don't have to do this alone," James whispered, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We're in this together, Claire." And in that moment, she believed him. She wasn't alone. She had James. And soon, they would have 2 little souls who would change their world forever. But neither of them could have predicted just how much their lives were about to change. Because fate had one more surprise in store. A storm before the miracle. The weeks leading up to Claire's due date were a blur of excitement, anxiety, and moments of pure exhaustion. Every day, James made it his mission to ensure Claire was comfortable, even if it meant late-night grocery runs for ice cream and pickles or endless foot massages after long hours of back pain. But beneath the surface, Claire couldn't shake the growing fear gnawing at her. She was about to become a mother. At 50, with twins. Would she be strong enough to go through childbirth? Would she live long enough to see them grow up? Every night, as James held her close, she wanted to voice these fears, but she swallowed them down, unwilling to add any more weight to his shoulders. But fate had a way of forcing the truth to the surface. A warning sign. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Claire had woken up with an unusual headache, a deep throbbing sensation that wrapped around her skull like a vice. "Maybe you need more rest," James suggested as he helped her sit up. Claire nodded, but as soon as she tried to stand, the world tilted violently. Dizziness, blurry vision. Then pain, sharp, deep, radiating from her lower back and curling around her stomach. "James," she gasped, gripping the bedpost to steady herself. "Something's wrong." James was already at her side. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No, I just—" Before she could finish, a warm rush of liquid ran down her legs. Her water had broken. Too soon. Panic clawed at her throat as James grabbed his phone. "Hold on, baby," he murmured, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his fear. "We've got this." A fight for survival. The ambulance ride felt like an eternity. Claire was vaguely aware of the paramedics asking her questions, checking her vitals, and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. All she could focus on was the pain, deep, relentless waves that seemed to take her breath away. James never let go of her hand. "You're gonna be okay," he kept saying. "I promise." But even he wasn't sure. At the hospital, everything moved at lightning speed. Doctors, nurses, bright lights. A flurry of hands moving over her, wires attaching to her arms, the steady beep of machines monitoring her every heartbeat. Then, the words she had feared most. "Her blood pressure is dangerously high. We need to deliver the babies now." Preeclampsia. A condition that, if left untreated, could be fatal for both her and the twins. Claire's heart pounded. "We need to do an emergency C-section," the doctor said firmly. "Right now." James paled but nodded. "Do whatever you need to do. Just keep her safe." Claire felt herself being wheeled into the operating room, the sound of James' voice fading as the anesthesia took hold. Her last conscious thought before everything went black was simple. "Please, let me survive this. Let my babies be okay." The line between life and death. The next time Claire opened her eyes, the world was blurry and strange. White ceiling, soft beeping, the faint scent of antiseptic, a hospital room. She blinked, her throat dry, her body aching in ways she had never known before. "Claire." James' voice. She turned her head slowly. There he was, sitting beside her bed, his hands wrapped around hers. His face was tired, but his eyes were filled with something she couldn't quite describe. Relief. Love. A quiet, unspeakable pain. "James?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "The babies." His lips parted, but for a moment, no words came out. Claire's heart seized. "James," she rasped, her grip tightening on his hand. "Tell me." A single tear slid down his cheek, but then, "They're alive," he said, his voice breaking. "They're alive, Claire." A sob ripped from her chest. Alive. She had never realized how much power that one word held. "But it was close," James continued, his hand brushing against her cheek. "Claire, we almost lost you." She swallowed hard. "What happened?" James exhaled. "Your blood pressure kept rising during the surgery. Your heart stopped for almost a minute. They had to resuscitate you." Her breath hitched. She had died. And yet, she was here. James cupped her face, his fingers trembling. "I thought I lost you, Claire. I thought." She pressed her forehead against his, her tears mingling with his. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here." They stayed like that for what felt like forever, holding onto each other as if letting go would make the nightmare real again. Two tiny miracles. Later that day, after Claire had been stabilized, a nurse entered the room, pushing a small bassinet. "Would you like to meet your babies?" she asked with a warm smile. Claire's breath caught in her throat. James helped her sit up, supporting her weak body as the nurse gently lifted a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blue fabric. "Meet your son," she whispered, placing the baby in Claire's arms. Claire gasped. He was perfect. Tiny, delicate fingers, a full head of dark curls. His skin was a beautiful shade between hers and James'. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced a finger over his soft cheek. "Elijah," she murmured. "Elijah James Carter." James smiled, kissing the top of Claire's head. "Strong name." Then the nurse lifted another bundle, this one wrapped in pink. "And here's your daughter," she said, placing the little girl in James' arms. James let out a shaky laugh. "God, she's beautiful." Claire reached over, touching her daughter's tiny hand. "Naomi Claire Carter," James whispered. Claire let out a small, breathless laugh. "We did it, James." He looked at her, his gaze filled with awe. "No, Claire. You did it. You fought for them. For us." Claire held both of her babies close, their warmth filling her with a sense of peace she had never known before. She had been afraid. She had doubted herself. But as she sat there, holding the two miracles she never thought she would have, she realized something. Love had brought them here. Love had saved them. And love would carry them forward, no matter what challenges lay ahead. A new beginning, a new battle. The days following the birth of Elijah and Naomi were a blur of emotions, exhaustion, and overwhelming love. Claire and James spent every waking moment marveling at their newborns, memorizing their tiny faces, their soft coos, the way their fingers instinctively curled around their parents' hands. But amidst the beauty of new life, an undercurrent of uncertainty lingered. Because while Claire had survived childbirth, her body had not emerged unscathed. A mother's silent struggle. Claire had always prided herself on being strong. She had weathered the storms of life with resilience, losing her parents, battling heartbreak, finding love again at 50 when the world told her it was impossible. But this was unlike anything she had ever faced. The pain in her body was constant. Sharp aches in her back, a deep, radiating soreness in her abdomen from the emergency C-section. But more than that, there was a heaviness in her chest that she couldn't shake. It started subtly, a feeling of exhaustion that ran deeper than lack of sleep. A strange, persistent sadness even as she gazed at her baby's perfect faces. Then came the intrusive thoughts. What if I don't live long enough to see them grow up? What if I'm not strong enough to be a mother at this age? What if James regrets this? Claire kept these thoughts to herself, forcing a smile whenever James looked at her with concern. "You're incredible," he would tell her, kissing her forehead as she rocked Elijah to sleep. But deep down, she didn't feel incredible. She felt lost. James notices the change. James was no fool. He had seen Claire navigate life with unwavering strength, and now he was watching her crumble in silence. At first, he told himself she was just adjusting. Motherhood was hard, especially with twins. The late-night feedings, the constant diaper changes, the endless cries, it was overwhelming. But then he started noticing the little things. The way Claire stared blankly at the wall when she thought no one was looking. The way she barely ate, barely spoke. The way she held Naomi just a little too tightly, as if afraid to let go. One night, as the twins slept peacefully, James found Claire sitting in the nursery, her back against the crib, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "Claire," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Talk to me." She wiped at her face quickly. "I'm fine. Just tired." James wasn't convinced. "This isn't just exhaustion, is it?" She hesitated. I don't know what's wrong with me, James. I should be happy." We have everything we ever wanted. But I feel empty and scared, and like I don't deserve this." James' heart clenched. He had read about postpartum depression, but never thought it would happen to Claire. She had always been so strong. But that was the thing about depression. It didn't care how strong you were. "Claire," he said, taking her hands in his, "you are not alone in this. And you are not broken." She looked at him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Then why do I feel like I am?" James kissed her knuckles. "Because sometimes even the strongest need help. And that's okay." Reaching for help. The next morning, James made a decision. "Claire, I think you should talk to someone." She frowned. "Like a therapist?" "Yes, and maybe a doctor. Just to make sure your body is healing properly too. You went through something life-threatening, Claire. It's okay to need help." Claire hesitated. The thought of admitting she wasn't okay made her stomach twist. But then she looked at Elijah and Naomi, peacefully sleeping in their crib. She wanted to be there for them. Fully. Not just physically, but emotionally. So, for the first time in her life, she let herself be vulnerable. She agreed to see a doctor. A difficult diagnosis. Claire's postpartum checkup revealed more than just emotional struggles. Her doctor frowned as she reviewed Claire's vitals. "Your blood pressure is still dangerously high." Claire's stomach dropped. "But I thought it would go down after the birth." In most cases, it does. But for some women, postpartum hypertension lingers. And in rare cases, it can lead to heart complications. James, who had insisted on coming with her, gripped her hand. "What do we do? We'll start you on medication immediately. But Claire, you need to take this seriously. Your body went through a massive trauma. If we don't control your blood pressure, you could be at risk for heart failure." The word sent a jolt of fear through Claire. Heart failure. She had barely gotten to hold her babies, barely had a chance to be their mother. James saw the panic in her eyes and cupped her face gently. "We'll get through this," he whispered. "Together." The strength to fight. Claire started therapy. She took her medication religiously, and slowly, painfully, she started to heal. There were still bad days, days where the exhaustion felt unbearable, where the fears crept back in. But there were also good days, days where Elijah giggled for the first time, days where Naomi gripped her father's nose and refused to let go, days where James held her in bed, whispering, "We made it, baby," and she believed him. One evening, as they sat in their backyard, watching the sunset while the twins slept inside, Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I was so scared I wouldn't make it," she admitted softly. James pulled her close. "But you did." She looked at him, her heart full. "And I'll keep fighting. For them. For you. For us." James smiled. "That's the Claire I fell in love with." Claire rested her head against his shoulder, finally understanding something she had struggled with for months. Strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up. And she would always, always get back up. The storm they never saw coming. Life had a strange way of testing people. Just when Claire and James had found their rhythm as new parents, just when the storm of postpartum depression and health scares seemed to be passing, another wave came crashing in. This time, it wasn't Claire's body that threatened to break. It was their world. An unexpected visitor. It started with a knock on the door. James had just put Elijah and Naomi down for their afternoon nap, and Claire was preparing tea in the kitchen when the sharp rapping sound echoed through the house. James frowned. They weren't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing there was a woman he hadn't seen in over a decade. His mother. "James," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "May I come in?" James felt his chest tighten. The last time he had spoken to his mother, she had disowned him for marrying a white woman. And now here she was, after all these years. After everything. Claire walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She stopped mid-step when she saw who was at the door. "Mrs. Carter," Claire said, her voice cautious but polite. James' mother turned to her, her eyes scanning Claire as if seeing her for the first time. Then she looked past her, into the living room where framed photos of the twins hung on the wall. Her lips trembled. I heard you had children," she whispered. "Twins." James crossed his arms. "And suddenly, you care." A flash of guilt crossed his mother's face. "I know I don't deserve to be here, James. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I need to see them." Claire glanced at James. She could see the war raging inside him. This was his mother, the woman who raised him, who had once been his rock, until she let her prejudices destroy their relationship. But could people change? Could she? Claire gently touched James' hand, giving him the choice. After a long pause, James stepped aside. "Come in." Old wounds reopened. James' mother sat stiffly on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the photos, the baby toys, the warmth of the home her son had built. Claire sat across from her, silent but observant. She wasn't sure how she felt about this woman suddenly appearing in their lives. James sat beside her, his body tense. "Why now?" he asked, his voice flat. His mother sighed. "Because I was wrong, James. I let my ignorance and my fear dictate my choices, and I lost my son because of it." James clenched his jaw. "You didn't lose me. You threw me away." His mother flinched. "I know, and I regret it every single day." Silence filled the room. Then, hesitantly, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. James frowned. "What is that?" She placed it on the table. "Letters. Dozens of them. I wrote them every year on your birthday. I never sent them because I didn't know if I had the right to. But I kept them, hoping that maybe, one day, I'd find the courage to tell you how much I love you." James stared at the envelope, his emotions tangled in knots. Claire reached for his hand under the table, grounding him. His mother wiped a tear from her cheek. "James, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if there's any part of you that can give me a chance to know my grandchildren, I would be grateful." James swallowed hard. He looked at Claire, then at the photos of Elijah and Naomi. "Give me time," he finally said. "That's all I can promise." His mother nodded, her lips trembling. "That's more than I deserve." A mother's instinct. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Claire turned to James. "Are you okay?" He exhaled, staring at the ceiling. "I don't know." Claire ran her fingers over his arm. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just take it one day at a time." James sighed. I don't want to let her hurt us again. But I also don't want to rob our children of a chance to know their grandmother if she's truly changed." Claire understood, but something about this felt off. Something she couldn't quite put her finger on. A shocking discovery. Over the next few weeks, James' mother made an effort to prove herself. She visited often, bringing small gifts for the twins, sitting with Claire as she fed them, telling James old stories from his childhood. It seemed genuine, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more. Then, one afternoon, as she was tidying up the living room, she noticed something odd. James' mother had left her purse on the couch while she played with the babies. It had tipped over, and a single sheet of paper had fallen out. Claire bent down to pick it up, and her blood ran cold. It wasn't a note. It wasn't an old letter. It was a court document, an official petition for grandparental visitation rights. Claire's breath hitched. She read the fine print. James' mother had already filed a request with the courts, just in case James didn't let her see the children. She was trying to secure legal access to their babies. Claire's hand shook as she put the paper back. She turned to look at James' mother, who was holding Naomi in her arms, a sweet smile on her face. And for the first time, Claire saw the truth. This wasn't about making amends. This was about control. Betrayal unveiled. That night, Claire showed James the document. His face darkened. She already filed this. Without talking to us. Claire nodded. She never planned to earn our trust. She planned to force her way into their lives, no matter what. James' hands curled into fists. Everything. The apologies, the letters, the gifts. It was all manipulation. James was quiet for a long time. Then, in a voice that was eerily calm, he said, "She made her choice once. Now, I'm making mine." Claire took his hand. "What do you want to do?" James exhaled sharply. "We're going to fight this. She will never take our children from us." Claire squeezed his hand. "Then we fight together." The storm rises. The days that followed were tense. James confronted his mother, demanding an explanation. She tried to backpedal, claiming it was just a precaution, that she was afraid of losing them again. James wasn't having it. "Love isn't forced," he told her coldly. "And if you truly cared about us, you wouldn't be trying to manipulate your way in." His mother's face fell. "If you go through with this," James warned, "you will never see me, Claire, or the twins again." Tears welled in her eyes. "James, please." But it was too late. James took Claire's hand, turned away, and closed the door. A battle for love and family. James stood at the doorway, his body tense with anger and heartbreak as he watched his mother walk away. Claire, standing beside him, felt the weight of it all pressing down on them. What had started as an emotional reconciliation had spiraled into a nightmare, one that threatened to upend the life they had built for themselves and their children. But one thing was clear. They would not let anyone take their babies from them. The legal war begins. The following morning, James and Claire wasted no time. They contacted a family law attorney, a woman named Lisa Thornton, who had a reputation for being relentless in court. Lisa listened intently as James explained the situation, showing her the grandparental visitation petition his mother had secretly filed. When he finished, Lisa leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. "This isn't just about visitation," she said. "It's about power." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" Lisa tapped the document. "In some cases, grandparents who successfully win visitation rights can use that as a stepping stone to seek custody, especially if they argue that the parents are unfit." James' stomach clenched. "You're saying she could try to take our children?" Lisa nodded. "It's a long shot, but I've seen it happen. Some judges are sympathetic to grandparents, especially if they claim they were pushed out of their grandkids' lives unfairly. The fact that she's already filed before even speaking with you about it, that's a huge red flag." Claire's breath caught in her throat. "What do we do?" Lisa folded her hands on her desk. "We fight, and we make sure she doesn't get a single opportunity to twist this in her favor." The betrayal runs deeper. As they prepared their case, Lisa conducted a deeper investigation into James' mother. What she uncovered shook them to the core. She found evidence that James' mother had been speaking to a children's welfare advocate, someone who specialized in helping grandparents regain access to their grandchildren when they felt the parents were keeping them away. Even worse, she had submitted a sworn statement claiming that Claire had been suffering from severe postpartum depression and was unfit to care for the twins. Claire gasped when she read the statement. She's using my postpartum struggles against me." Her hands trembled as she handed the paper back to Lisa. "That was months ago. I got help. I'm fine now." Lisa's jaw tightened. "She's trying to build a case against you, Claire. She wants to make it seem like your condition makes you an unreliable mother." James' eyes darkened. "This isn't about wanting to be part of their lives. She's trying to take them." Lisa nodded. "If she gets a judge to believe you're unstable, she could push for custody, or at the very least, permanent visitation rights, which could lead to more influence over your children." Claire's body shook with rage. "She smiled in my face. She held our babies, all while planning this." James clenched his fists. "I won't let her do this. I won't let her take our family." Lisa leaned forward. Then we need to get ahead of this. You need to be prepared for everything. The courtroom showdown. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than they had expected. James and Claire sat side by side in the courtroom, their lawyer ready to fight for them. Across the aisle sat James' mother, dressed in a modest navy blue suit, her expression sorrowful, as if she were the victim. When the judge entered, the proceedings began. James' mother's attorney argued that she had been unfairly kept from her grandchildren, that James had abandoned his family by cutting her off, and that Claire's mental health struggles put the children at risk. Claire's face burned with humiliation as the lawyer painted her as a fragile, unstable mother. James gritted his teeth. This is disgusting. But Lisa was ready. She destroyed their arguments piece by piece. She presented evidence that James' mother had cut him off first, disowning him over his marriage. She revealed the manipulation, the secret court filing, the welfare advocate meetings. Then she called Claire to the stand. Claire took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. "I won't deny that I struggled after giving birth," she said, her voice strong but emotional. "But I got help. I leaned on my husband, my friends, my doctors, and I have been a good mother to my babies. The only person who has tried to cause pain in this family is the woman sitting across from me." James' mother stiffened. Claire turned to the judge. "This isn't about love. It's about control. If she truly cared, she wouldn't have gone behind our backs. She wouldn't have used my struggles against me. She wouldn't be here today trying to force her way into our lives through the courts." A heavy silence filled the room. Then the judge spoke. The verdict. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, the judge rendered a decision. "I find no justifiable reason to grant visitation rights to the petitioner," the judge declared. "The parents have every right to decide what is best for their children." Claire exhaled sharply. James squeezed her hand. It was over. James' mother collapsed into tears. "James, please," she sobbed as they left the courtroom. "I just wanted to be part of their lives." James turned to her, his face unreadable. "You wanted control, not love, and that's why you lost." Without another word, he walked away, Claire beside him, their future now protected. Moving forward, the battle had been exhausting, but it had also strengthened them. James and Claire knew now more than ever how strong their love was, how much they were willing to fight for their family. As they tucked Elijah and Naomi into bed that night, James wrapped his arms around Claire, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We did it," he whispered. Claire smiled. "We protected them. That's all that matters." The storm had passed, and their love had only grown stronger.